Good morning, all Fiji Indians and all Fiji Indians residing overseas, and also all to Toki Fijians living in Fiji and overseas. The reason for the second presentation in English is because my Facebook account was hacked on Friday morning and I lost all my Girmit research work for the last 4 years. On Thursday evening, there were more than 3,100 views by Friday morning, and then the Facebook account was hacked because of some people. So I'll move straight to the topic, and the topic is Rabi Island, Girmitiyas and Leonidas. So in brief, Rabi Island is a volcanic island in between Vanuatu and Taveuni. And the history I'll cover very briefly about Rabi Island. In 1855, the Tongan military conquered the Fijian rebels that were on Rabi Island following a request from the Tui Dakau in Taveuni. And Tui Dakau at that time was the high chief for Taveuni. And I also believe even at that time, the whole of the Kondrove and Rabi and few other islands. On their departure a few years later, the island was sold to Europeans to cover some outstanding debts. And in 1941, the British government purchased Rabi Island from the Australian firm Lever Brothers for £25,000 to serve as a new home for the Banabans of the Ocean Island from the Gilbert Islands. And that's where they were settled. So I will cover who owned Rabi Island. And Rabi Island was owned by Captain J. Hill. And he actually came from England many years ago and settled in Sydney. And his two boys actually were raised on Rabi Island once he purchased the island. And then his two sons actually went to a very famous high school college in Newington College in Sydney at the beginning of 1880. And when he purchased the island from King George Tapau I of Tonga, his young family actually moved to Rabi Island from Sydney in 1873. So he had two sons. One was Horace and the other one was John Frank Hill. And then subsequently, after finishing high school, they went back to Rabi Island. Frank actually established a very successful career in the Fijian coconut and sugar industry, and then he managed some of the plantations run by Colonial Sugar Refining Company. Horace, on the other hand, one day he went hunting at the age of 18, and he shot himself in the leg, and then after a couple of days, he passed away. So, when the island was sold by the Hill family to the firm Lever Brothers, and I've done some research on the Lever Southwest Pacific Limited. It was one of the largest owners of copra plantations in the South Pacific, not only in Fiji on Rabi Island, but also some very large plantations in the Solomon Islands and other islands in the South Pacific. And when you read the record of Lever Brothers Southwest Pacific Limited, it was one of the worst companies that when it came to treating the natives. So in Solomon Islands, it is very difficult to find the right numbers, but one can actually believe that there were many Solomon Islanders shot to death by the Lever Southwest Pacific Limited. So, what is the relationship between the Girmitiyas and the Leonidas. And that's where the topic will go further. And for many people in Fiji, both Fiji Indians and Itoki brothers and sisters, and also all the Fiji Indians living in Fiji and overseas, that you'll be surprised that the first batch of Girmitiyas who came to Leonidas actually were settled on Rabi Island. And I'll go to the history of that, and then some other statistics, which will be interesting. So the Leonidas actually left the port of Calcutta on 28 January 1879 with close to 550 Girmitiyas on board. So the life of the Girmitiyas on board was not easy. As I mentioned earlier in my last presentation, the Girmitiyas were recruited in many remote parts of Uttar Pradesh, such as Ikona, Maharajganj, Meerut, Gorakhpur, the Basti area, etc. And then they were taken to the depots in Calcutta, where they might have stayed 1 month or 2 months or 3 months before they boarded a ship, whether it was going to Fiji or Mauritius or Guyana or Suriname or South Africa for that matter. So the work on the ship started at 6 a.m. and then after doing the chores, they had breakfast between 8 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. and then during the day there were other chores to be done. So after leaving the port of Calcutta on 28 January 1879, the Leonidas finally reached the Fiji waters, were very close to the island of Ovalau, on the evening of 14th May 1879. And because of the inexperience of the captain with the Fiji waters, because of so many reefs surrounding the island of Ovalau and right down till Kandabu, and then there was darkness approaching, and then there was presence of not only coral reefs, but they also say that there were some very sharp coral reefs which could have damaged the hull of Leonidas. So it was not able to enter the harbour. So J.B. Thurston, the colonial secretary, went early the next day to warn the captain of the dangerous passage to the sea. And when they were close or very close to the Leonidas, the sergeant superintendent shouted that there had been cholera and smallpox on board, and even diarrhea and dysentery on the voyage from Calcutta to Fiji. This was an alarming news for the colonial secretary, because a few years earlier more than 40,000 Fijians had died out of the 160,000 ethnic Fijians. So Thurston reported news to the governor, George William de Vaux, and then it was decided that the Leonidas will not enter the port of Levuka. And at that time, the governor was actually concerned, and he even decided at one stage that the Leonidas be sent back to the high seas and not unload any of the Girmitiyas. So after a while, they decided that the Leonidas can be bought inside the Barrier Reef, but be anchored in the harbour to the leeward side of Levuka town. And then, during that period, while it was in the mooring ground, if you can say, it's still anchored off, not at Levuka harbour, but outside of Levuka harbour, there were boats which patrolled the Leonidas day and night to ensure that no Girmitiyas jumped from Leonidas and swam to the port of Levuka or landed on the island of Overloud. So while this was going on, the colonial administrators decided that the Girmitiyas were going to be quarantined on a small island called Yenuda Lai Lai, which is a tiny island, or was a tiny island of about 100 acres at that time, but because of soil erosion and the rain of 144 years and the rise of the sea level, it apparently, they say, according to the records, that the island is actually about 72 acres and it's a mixture of limestone and volcanic rocks. So, where Leonidas was anchored off Levuka to Yenuda Lai Lai was around 10 miles, and the colonial administrators then recruited 700 very fit Fijian young men from Motoriki Island, from Overloud, and also near Tailevu. And they were sent, and within 2 days after the order was given, these 700 men then went to Yenuda Lai Lai and built about 20 bures or large 20 bures, a hospital, a storehouse, quarters for the depot keeper. So that was going to initially house about 350 Girmitiyas. And then later on, they decided to build 30 more houses by utilizing the 700 very fit Fijian men for the other 150 Girmitiyas, and also those Girmitiyas who were married couples and those who actually came on the Leonidas with children. So taking the Girmitiyas from Leonidas to Yenuda Lai Lai was a challenge in itself. Not only some of the Girmitiyas were still ill of some sort. The passage was about 10 miles, and there was hardly any boats available to transport them from where Leonidas was anchored and Yenuda Lai Lai. So each boat actually took a whole day for the trip. So the colonial administrators, when the young 700 Fijian men built more than 50 large bures and the hospital and the storehouse, warehouse, and other facilities on Yenuda Lai Lai, they were very thankful to Roko Tui Tailevu at that time, Ratu Abel, the eldest son of Dakambau, for the cooperation they had showed and the willingness which the Fijians had carried out the work to ensure that the houses were built. So many would believe that the Girmitiyas stayed for a very short time on Yenuda Lai Lai. That's actually a myth. The Girmitiyas stayed on Yenuda Lai Lai till the 15th of August. And during this period, 15 more Girmitiyas died because of dysentery, diarrhea, and typhoid. And then it was only after 15th of August that some Girmitiyas were released, and there was a meeting held in Levuka with the governor then, with all the plantation owners, of recruiting the Girmitiyas. On the day, all the plantation owners resisted in no uncertain terms, and they actually told the governor they were not going to recruit any Girmitiyas to work on their plantation. Only one planter, Captain John Hill of Rabi Island, whose island was a total freehold land, decided to take 106 Girmitiyas to Rabi Island to work on copra plantation. So 52 men, 25 women, 29 children, then left Leonidas on their journey to Rabi Island. So from Yenuda line to Rabi Island is close to about 220 to 240 kilometers, depending on the passage you take and some of the reefs which you have to bypass. So it was only towards the end of 1879, around November, that there was a very widespread of noxious weeds in the Rewa area, and it was infected with a disease called coffee leaves, and then the first batch of Girmitiyas were taken on a temporary basis for 1 year to work on a plantation called Great Amalgam Estate in Rewa. So 139 men, 58 women, and 18 children were taken there for a year. And when the plantation owners were satisfied of their work, then only the next batch of Girmitiyas were taken to the 4 plantations. One was owned by J.E. Mason of Taviuni, the other J.C. Smith, Sal and Company, and Bailey of Vitilevu. So very quickly, I'll give you a breakdown of how the Girmitiyas from Leonidas went to different plantations in Fiji towards the end of 1879. So, J.E. Mason, the place is called Gila, in Taviuni, 52 men, 28 women, 8 children and 1 infant. J.C. Smith, Vitilevu East, 43 men, 21 women, 6 children. Shal and Company, Muniveni, which is in Neta City when you go past Sawani or Andi Dakambao College. And so it's Muniveni and the surrounding area, I believe, is Bollywood. Then CSR, Sal and Company, 40 men, 20 women, 4 children and 2 infants. CSR had come into the picture then in Nasuri, 43 men, 25 women, 7 children and 1 infant. And then I had mentioned about John Hill. So the colonial secretary in Suva, 4 men, 2 women, 1 child. The police in Rewa, 2 men and 1 Girmitiya lady. Sir John Gil Gori in Suva, 1 man. Hobda in Levuka, 1 Girmitiya woman. B. Morris, 1 man. Tena in Rewa, 1 man and 1 Girmitiya lady. J. Colney in Levuka, 1 man and 1 Girmitiya lady. G. Smith in Levuka, 2 Girmitiya men and 2 Girmitiya ladies and 1 child. And Smith in Levuka, 1 Girmitiya lady and 1 child. So when all the planters refused in August 1879, except for Captain John Hill, the governor at that time had no choice, and the colonial administrators. So they had to offer the rest of the Girmitiyas work in the government. So that was in Public Works Department, mostly for the Girmitiya men, for road construction and drainage construction, clearing the forest, etc. And the women mostly worked as housemaids, cleaners, house girls for for the colonial administrators. So while I am on this topic, I went to Tavyuni in May, towards the middle of May, and then I had interviewed some people from Tavyuni, and they told me that they were Girmitiyas taken to Rambi Island. And then I also interviewed some Rambi Islanders in Vanuatu, and they told me that there is an area on Rambi Island where there are graves of Girmitiyas, but which I have to investigate the matter through the Rambi Island Council, and I've been given a name, Kajri Christopher, and I'll be writing to the Prime Minister Sitiveni Rambuka and the Deputy Prime Minister Biman Parsad that an investigation take place, and where the graves are, they be identified. And also, next year, on 14th May, or even after that, say for example the 15th of August, when the Girmitiyas would have landed on Rambi Island, there should be a memorial service, and the government, in conjunction with some Indian organizations, they should build a monument in the memory of the Girmitiyas, that the first batch of Girmitiyas who came on Leonidas actually went to Rambi Island to work on the plantation over there. So imagine if you were from Uttar Pradesh, in one of the remote areas, whether it was Gorakhpur or Lucknow or Meerut or Maharajganj or the Basti area. You made your journey to the depots in Calcutta, and then you were probably there for 1 or 2 months, and then you were on Leonidas till 14th of May, when you reached probably Avalau, and then you spent 3 months on Yenuda Lailai. Imagine the journey when you had never seen an ocean, through some very rough seas, very crowded and insanitary conditions. And then you landed on Rambi Island, an island which covers only an area of about 67 square kilometers. If I was one of those Girmitiyas, I would have probably suffered mental depression for the rest of my life. So, we as the 4th and the 5th generation of Fiji Indians, we should be very proud that our Girmitiyas were very strong mentally and physically, that they were able to undergo this treacherous journey, not only to Fiji, and then spend 3 months of quarantine on a very small island, Yenuda Lailai. So I also heard that when the Liva Southwest Pacific Plantation ran the copra plantation on Rambi Island, so when it came to the payment for the Girmitiyas, whether it was payday after 6 months of hard work or 12 months, and they would ask that particular Girmitiya to dig a large hole in the ground. And then the Girmitiyas was shot and then buried. I am told, and I've consulted some pandits and priests and holy people, that those people who were most likely shot and not even buried properly, but just covered the hole and treated as if they were some sort of animals, their spirits will never be happy. So once this investigation is carried out, those bodies need to be dug and recovered, and they need to be cremated as per the Hindu ritual or Hindu religion, because we cremate people. And their ashes then be taken and dispersed into the ocean to give the spirit or the Atma of what we call in Hindi, Shanti. And I would urge very strongly that the Indian leaders of religious organizations such as the Sanatan Dharam, the Arya Samaj, and the political parties, whether it is the National Federation Party or the Fiji Labour Party, and that on 14th May next year, or around there, please take a delegation to Rabi Island and have a session and maybe a prayer, and remember the Girmitiyas who came on Leonidas and settled on Rabi Island. So that's it from me. The reason for this presentation was because there was overwhelming views on Thursday evening and Thursday night last week, and then I was recommended by many people that this presentation be done once more. And while I am on this presentation, I will do a presentation in Hindi, probably tomorrow. But on my recent visit to Tavyuni and parts of Bua and Bonwalevu, I will be doing another presentation, which will also be news to the Fiji Indians from Bonwalevu who are living on Bonwalevu and those who have migrated. But before I leave a quiz question for all the Fiji Indians living in Fiji and abroad, that when the Girmitiyas family did not have basically any food to eat, except maybe a bag of sharps and a couple of other things. So I want you to send me your answer either through text message. My number is 61-427-270-480, or you can email it to me on Pravind, pravind.kumar1939@gmail.com. That what were the two things the Girmitiyas ate to survive during the very, very hard times. So I'll be waiting to see if people can give me the correct answer. I don't want people to send me that satwa was one of the items that was eaten. We all know that. But there were two other things that was eaten by the Girmitiyas. So I would like you to think about the answer and talk to people what they may have eaten. So, once again, Ram Ram, Namaste, Namaskaram, Nisambula, Vinaka Vakalevu, Walaikum Salam, and Jai Shri Ram. This is Pravind Kumar from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, born and raised in Ba. Thank you for watching my presentation, and please pass it to as many friends and relations as possible and share with as many platforms as possible. Thank you once again. Dhanyawad.